welcome to another episode of Slaya TV with April Rogerson. Okay, this is not like any other show. So this is where we get inside April's mind and listen to what she's thinking and her opinions. And the reason we're doing that is because I find it always to be interesting. I guess I don't always have to agree, do I?
You probably don't. And sometimes I think I probably throw you off a little bit.
So tell me, what are we going to talk about this week, April? What's weighing on your mind? What's at the top?
I think that what I just was finished saying is that there's a difference between money and greed, and just the idea of what that looks like for us in the real estate market is important.
Good. So specifically, what are we talking about?
Well, the market has just been really, really crazy, and I get that. I think that with the interest rates being low and the inventory being low, that it created a kind of a cacophony where anything goes. And while that is kind of fine, it's not. It creates this wild, wild west kind of bending of the rules, and everyone's kind of like trying to get theirs, and it's like there is a level of fairness, I think, that should be in play there in regards to both sides getting the something that they're looking for.
Okay, I'll be that guy today.
Be that guy.
So I will. So what's wrong with me trying to get every dollar I can get out of my house?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that inherently. I think the issue becomes when we're talking greed. So earlier today, or yesterday, I had we submitted an offer. We are literally the only offer on this property, and it's been on the market for a couple of months now. They've reduced it. They went from $200 and some odd all the way down to $169. We give you a full price offer for the $169 that you have it listed for, and you are now wanting more money. If there was more money to be had, you would have gotten it. This is not rocket science. So that's when it turns to greed, because if you listed it at $179 a month ago and you didn't get any offers, now you're trying to gouge my client for one net. So in the end, she's like, well, I want $180. I want more. She didn't say she wanted more money, which is the other part. Let's just be honest.
But I've always heard, isn't greed good?
No, I don't think you've ever heard that greed was good.
I did. I saw it in a movie one time. The guy said,
there are lots and lots of movies and documentaries made about people being overcome by greed.
But doesn't money make the world go round?
It makes it go round, but it can also drive things to go belly up. So I don't think there's anything wrong with money. All of us work for money. All of us. So it would be no different than me. I make an agreement that I say I work for X amount of dollars. But now I'm like, well, I know I said that, but give me more money. They would look at me like I was crazy. So if I set a price, then I expect you to pay the price that I set. But I don't feel that it's fair to you. And then it is greedy of me to now say, I know I said A, but I want you to give me B. Most people say screw you. And they should. Maybe.
So there is an old saying that this conversation reminds me of. It's that pigs get fed and hogs get slaughtered.
Yeah.
And you're saying, what I hear you saying to people is, it's okay to be a little piggy, but don't be a hog.
Yeah, the hog part is, and I think it creates an adversarial marketplace, because again, buyers and sellers are on opposite end of the spectrum, but they have the same goal in mind. So if you're a seller who wants to sell, and this is provided that you actually want to sell, and you have a buyer who's saying, yes, I'll buy your house. You said this is the price. I'll give you the price that you asked for. Once you create this adversarial situation, it makes it difficult to get through the transaction to begin with. So now you send them through all of this kind of hoops to finally get you to agree to sign the papers. And now we have an inspection, we have an appraisal, we have a whole closing process that has to happen in order for us to even get to the point where you sell your home. And we're starting at not a good space. And again, I think there are people who are fine with this adversarial relationship in this space, but I don't think it has to be that way. And I think that if we have all these different pockets of sellers approaching it that way, the marketplace gets kind of cluttered with nastiness that doesn't need to happen. So
now I want to throw you a curveball.
Sure.
We didn't plan on this. So I'm off camera. People can't see me.
They can't see you.
They can't. So I'm a white guy.
Are you really?
I am.
Oh my God.
And I would have told you when I got out of bed this morning that I don't have an ounce of systemic racism in my body, that I don't care. I don't care what color you are. I don't care who you sleep with. I don't care.
Yeah.
I would have said that when I got out of bed. And then by the time I had gotten here in 15 minutes, I observed the behavior happening. So for those that have watched one of your previous episodes, we have the background behind you.
Not just the background. I actually just got to watch it, but go ahead.
It looks as if you're sitting in a living room talking to us.
Yes.
And there's pictures on the wall in this living room.
There are.
And this is supposed to look like it's your living room and this is your life, right?
Yeah.
And what was in the pictures?
People that didn't look like me.
A bunch of white people.
Well, I was going to say they didn't look like me. They didn't have blue hair. They didn't. No, they a bunch of white people.
Bunch of white people hanging on the wall in your living room.
Yeah.
And I catch this.
Yes.
And I say to our video marketing department, I'm like, so we're going to impose a background behind April. And it's nice. It's a nice room. It looks like she's sitting in a very nice living room in a very nice house. And we have pictures on the wall. And it's supposed to be her family pictures. And it's a bunch of white people. What the hell is wrong with us?
Well, I think that, and this is not to like josh you or like pat you on the back. I do think that it is inherently a plus that you picked up on this. I think that there's a time where you probably would not have picked up on this. And I think that so there's all these different things that happen in the world that I don't look, and we've talked about this, I don't see them as just blatantly black and white or blatantly quote unquote racist. So
we weren't trying to be bad people when we did
I don't think that, but I don't know, maybe I have to have a talk with Rob. No.
There was nobody that was going, nah, we don't want any black people on the wall. Let's put someone. We just didn't even think about it, did we?
I don't think you thought about it. And I think this is so I won't say systemic in the way that social justice perspective of systemic. However, it is systemic in the sense of the lens that you all are seeing the world is not inclusive in that way. So even in other times where you have commercials and different things like that, and there are so many people who are like, why do we need that? And I'm like, because you will likely think that it's okay to have my whole entire video have white people in my background, and it's like, is that wrong per se? No, it's not wrong, but if we're being realistic in what my background probably really looks like, then.
It's a sad moment for me this morning when I realized, you catch yourself doing, nobody was being a bad guy. Nobody was trying to make a statement. It was just a natural course of decision making that we need to stop.
Yeah, and I think not in just that sense, but I also think that this is when people talk about having other voices in the room. Because most people think, well, what's the big deal if it's all white or all Asian or all whatever? But if it's not representative in some regard, whether it's having a woman in the room or having a person of color in the room, then it will be heavily weighted in one singular perspective. And that's when we start running into issues of people feeling like the blind spots become real. They're not just blind spots. They affect people in different ways. So just for clarity's sake, I wasn't hurt when I first looked at the video. First of all, I was distracted. So let's start there. But then as I started looking at the video, I'm like, wow. Between that and just the montages that were created that, again, in terms of what our perception of family looks like, our perception of what looks like wholesomeness looks like. I think that we do have, and not when I say we, I mean y'all, but you know what I mean, have an idea in their mind, and you are approaching it from what you already have inside your brain that you don't even realize, like you said. So
well, it was a great learning moment for me, and I think it helps to be around people like yourself who are smart and have edgy ideas and challenge the way I think. So it helps increase the awareness. I got one other thing before we let you go today.
Should I
You
say
know
what?
where I'm about to go with this too. The Georgia legislature just passed a new voter election law thing and requiring, the big part about it, the controversial part is requiring voter ID.
Do you think that that's the controversial part?
Seems to be what I hear everybody talking
I
about.
gotcha.
What's the problem? So I'm gonna present this and then you give me the counterpoint. What's the problem with asking people to show ID when they vote? I have to show ID when I order a drink, to drive a car, to get on an airplane. Showing ID is a part of the fabric of our lives now for a lot of good reasons. What's the problem with this?
I don't know that I think that, well, one, I will tie this into what we just spoke about, but I think that the ID in and of itself is not the issue. It is the access to the ID that is the issue.
Okay.
So if there is something going to be put in place where people are able to either provide identification to these people and or make it easier for people to get identification, then I don't think that that's necessarily inherently an issue. I think that in terms of the overall voting process, it should be as streamlined and as fraud-free as possible. However, I think that that's one piece of the bill that people are concerned about. The other piece also ties into the lens from which the people who wrote the bill were looking. So I don't look at this as a strictly racial issue. I think it is also across socioeconomic lines where they're not looking at it from a lens of who has access. They're looking at it from their own lens, which is all of who supports us have access to the ID. Those that support them have access to water and they're not standing on long, ridiculous lines to vote. And in terms of the whole idea of the voter ID, the water, the food, and all of those things, they are not taking into account what these people are experiencing when it comes to voting. So for them, they're like, what's the big deal? Because you're able to go into this voter location, show your ID because you drove there, show your ID, vote, and go home. You don't have to stand in a long line. Your barriers to voting are almost non-existent. So for other people, and it's not just brown people, there are also people who are poor who have to go very far to get to vote and things like that are very compromised by some of the things that were added to this. And then lastly, changing the law based on the experience that they had previously. When it comes to this stuff, it's like they pack it in with a whole bunch of crap. It's like, so now if it was only voter ID, that would be one thing, but now you actually change who's in charge of overseeing the whole entire process. And when you do that, I think that people really get alarmed because like, well, what are you trying to pull here? And I think across the country, the voter process should be very balanced. It should be very representative of the people, very representative of the parties that are involved. So if it's now going to say that depending on who's in power, that is who is making the decisions, then there are going to be a lot of disenfranchised people, whether they're racially or socioeconomically disenfranchised.
So is it fair to say, would it be a fair characterization to say that you're okay with some kind of voter verification to ensure we have fair elections, but let's make sure that everybody has access? Okay, so let's focus on that. Okay.
Yeah. And even the whole water, food thing, I think that even in that instance, if you are saying you're going to deny water or food, I don't think that's the answer. I think maybe it should be a bipartisan group of people that are volunteering to provide water and food.
I think that was the concern, right? People were using it to influence votes while people were standing in line. Yeah.
So, and that's their perspective. Again, I can't say because I have never gotten a bottle of water while I was standing in line. But
nobody brought me any treats.
No one brought me any treats. But I think that starting to lean towards a bipartisan way of approaching the election process is what is more important than some of the kind of divisive stuff that they put in that bill, which is where people are starting to get, rightfully so, a little concerned about where are you trying to go with this right now, because it seems as though you're trying to disenfranchise some people instead of trying to figure out ways to make things more fair.
Well, elections have consequences, so
They
hopefully
do.
people will take this energy that they have from this and put it into their voting efforts.
I agree.
And thank you for your opinion. This is another episode of Slayer TV. Tune in next week. Who knows what we'll talk about?
More comfortable with this yet. But hey, we did it.